welcome to the next edition of the HP Discover podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on IT innovation and how it's making an impact on people's lives. Our next big data thought leadership discussion highlights how big data analytics as a service expands the market for advanced analytics and insights. We'll see how bringing analytics to a cloud services model allows smaller and less data architecture experienced firms to benefit from the latest in big data capabilities. And we'll learn how Dasher Technologies is helping usher along this so-called democratization of big data. Here to share how big data as a service has evolved, we're joined by Justin Harrigan, Data Architecture Strategist at Dasher Technologies in Campbell, California. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having me today.
We're glad you could join us. We're also here with Chris Sasso, Senior Vice President of Technology at Dasher Technologies. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Dana. Looking forward to our talk.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. Justin, how have big data practices changed over, say, the past 5 years or so that perhaps has set the stage for multiple models or different alternatives when it comes to leveraging big data technology?
Yeah, Dana, that's a great way to start. Back in 2010, we kind of saw big data become mainstream. Hadoop became kind of a household name in the IT industry, doing stuff on scale-out architectures. Linux database was becoming common practice and moving away from kind of traditional legacy, smaller, slower databases allowed this whole new world of analytics to open up to previously untapped resources within companies. So data that people had just been sitting on could now be used for actionable insights. Fast forward to 2015, I think we've seen big data become more approachable. Before in 2010, 5 years ago, only the largest organizations or companies that were specifically designed to leverage big data architectures could do so. And the smaller guys, maybe had a couple hundred or even tens of terabytes, and still just, it was required too much expertise or too much time and investment to get a big data infrastructure up and running. Today, now we have, approachable analytics, analytics as a service, hardened architectures that are almost turnkey with back-end hardware, database support, and applications all integrating seamlessly together so that the user on the front end who's actually interacting with the data and making insights is able to do so with very little overhead, very little upkeep, and is able to turn that data into business impact data where they can make decisions for the company.
And Justin, how big of an impact has this had? How many more types of companies or verticals or size companies have been able to now start exploring these advanced cutting-edge big data capabilities? Is this a 20% increase, or are we perhaps even talking about almost any organization that wants to can start doing this?
Yeah, I mean, the tipping point, right, is when you outgrow your current solution for data analytics. I mean, data analytics is nothing new. We've been doing it for over 50 years with databases. It's just a matter of how big can you get, how much data can you put in one spot, and then run some sort of query against it and get a timely report that doesn't take a week to come back or time out on traditional database. So, almost every company nowadays is growing so rapidly with the type of data they have. It doesn't matter if you're an architecture firm, if you're a marketing company, if you're a large enterprise, getting information from all your smaller remote sites. Everyone's compiling data to create better business decisioning or create a system that makes their product run faster. And for people dipping their toe in the water for their first, larger data set analytics, there's a whole host of different avenues available to them. They can go online to some, online providers, scale up a database in a couple minutes and be running. They can download free trials of, Vertica has a community edition, and they can load it on a single server up to a terabyte and start running there, and significantly faster than traditional SQL. So, it's much more approachable. There's many different flavors and formats to start with, and I think people are realizing now that, I wouldn't even use the term big data anymore. It's almost the norm is big data.
Yeah, I suppose maybe the better term is any data, anytime, right?
Yeah, any data, anytime, anywhere, for anybody.
All right. I suppose another change over the past several years has been an emphasis away from batch processing, where you might do things at a infrequent or occasional basis, to this concept that's more applicable to a cloud or as a service model, where it's streaming or constant, continuous, and then you start reducing the latency down to getting close to real time. Has that been a big part of this too? Are we starting to see more and more companies being able to compress their feedback and start to use data more rapidly as a result of this shift in over the past 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think it's important to address the term big data. It's almost like an umbrella, almost like the way people use cloud. Big data, you think large data sets, but you mentioned speed and agility, right? And the ability to have real-time analytics is something that's becoming more prevalent, and the ability to not just run a batch process for 18 hours on petabytes of data, but to have a chart or a graph or some sort of report in real time that you can interact with and make decisions on the spot is becoming mainstream. And I kind of, we actually did a blog post on this not long ago, talking about, instead of big data, the data pipe, and that's, data ingest or fast data, typically OLTP data that needs to run in memory or on hardware that's extremely fast to create a data stream that can ingest, all the different points or sensors or machine data that's coming in. Then we talked about, smart or analytic data that required some sort of, number crunching data set on data that was relevant, not data that was real time, but still fairly new, call it 7 days or older to a year. And then the data lake, which essentially is your data repository for historical data crunching. So those are kind of the three areas I think you need to address when you talk about big data, and the ability to consume that data as a service now is being made available by a whole host of different companies in varying niches. Doesn't matter if it's log data, doesn't matter if it's sensor data. There's probably a service you can enable now to start having data come in and ingest it and make real-time decisions without having to stand up your own infrastructure.
Right. Okay, well, of course, when organizations try to do more of these advanced things that can be so beneficial to their business, they have to take into consideration the technology, of course, their skills, there's culture, people, process, and technology, right? So, Chris, tell us a bit about Dasher Technologies and how you are helping organizations do more with big data capabilities, and how you address this holistically in this whole approach of people, process, and technology.
Absolutely. Well, Dasher's founded in 1999 by Lori Dasher. To give you an idea who we are, we're a little over 65 employees now, and the size of our business is, somewhere over about $100 million. And we started by specializing in solving, major data center infrastructure challenges that folks had, by actually applying that people, process, and technology mantra. And we started in the data center, addressing people's scale-out server, storage, networking type of problems. And over the past 5 or 6 years, we've been really spending our energy and strategy and time on the big areas around mobility, around security, and, of course, big data. As a matter of fact, Justin and I were recently working on a project with a client around combining both mobility information and big data. It's a retail client. They want to be able to send information to a customer that might be walking through their store, maybe a coupon or things like that. So as Justin was just talking about fast information and making actionable things happen with that data quickly, you're combining, something around mobility with big data. So Dasher has built up our team to be able to have a set of solutions that can help people solve these kinds of problems.
Great. Justin, let's flesh that out a little bit around mobility. Of course, when people are using a mobile device, they're creating data that through apps can be shared back to, I suppose, the carrier, as well as application hosts, as well as the application writers. And so we have streams of data now about user experience and activities. We also can deliver data and insights out to people in the other direction in that real-time fashion, that closed loop, regardless of where they are. They don't have to be at their desk. They don't have to be looking at a specific business intelligence application, for example. So how has mobility changed the game in the past 5 years?
Yeah, Dana, it's funny you brought up the two different ways to capture data. Devices can be both used as a sensor point or as a way to interact with data. And I actually think I remember seeing a podcast or something you did with Vertica and Guess regarding how they interacted with their database on iPads.
Right.
So in regards to interacting with data, it's become not only useful to data analysts or data scientists, but we can push that down into a format to lower level folks that aren't so technical with fancy application in front of it, so that they can use the data as well to make decisions for companies and actually benefit the company. You give that data to someone in a store who can benefit by understanding, for example, for guests, where to put jeans in the store to impact sales. I mean, that's huge. That rather than giving them a quarterly report and stuff is out, product is outdated for the season, they can do it that same day and see what other sites are doing. On the flip side, mobile devices are now sensors. When you think about a mobile device, it's constantly pinging access points over Wi-Fi, and we can capture that data and through a MAC address as a unique identifier, follow someone as they move through a store or throughout a city, and then when they return, that person's data is captured into a database, and it becomes historical because they track it through their device, and it allows a whole new world of opportunities in terms of the way, for example, for retail, the way retailers interact with where they place merchandise, the way they interact with how they staff stores to make sure that they have the proper amount of people for the certain time, what weather impact has on the store. And lastly, Chris mentioned, how do we interact with people on devices by pushing them data that's relevant as they move throughout their day. So, the next generation of big data is not just capturing data and using it in reports, but taking that data in real time and then possibly pushing it back out to the person that needs it most. In the retail scenario, that's the end user, possibly giving them a coupon as they're standing in front of something on a shelf that is relevant and something they'll use.
Right. So we're not just talking about democratization of analytics in terms of the types of organizations, but now we're even talking about the types of individuals within those organizations. How have you seen, do you have any examples of some of perhaps Dasher's clients that have been able to exploit some of these advances and occurrences with mobile and cloud for working in tandem, and how that's produced some sort of a business benefit?
Yeah, I think a good example of someone that leveraged a large data set was one of our clients. I think Chris knows, we can share the name. One Kings Lane was having difficulty updating their website that users were acting with, because it's a flash shopping website where the information changes daily, and you have to be able to update it very quickly. And traditional technologies were just causing the business impact and slowing things down. So, they were able to leverage a really fast columnar database to make these changes and actually grow the inventory, grow the site, and have updates happen almost real time, so that there was no impact or downtime when they needed to make these changes. So that's a real world example of where big data has a direct impact on the business line.
And Chris, tell us a little bit about how Dasher works with HP Technologies, and perhaps even some other HP partners like Good Data when it comes to providing analytics as a service?
Certainly, yeah. HP has been a longtime partner from the very beginning, actually, when Lori started the company. And we've been actually a partner of Vertica's before HP purchased them back in 2011. So we had started working with Vertica around big data, and Justin was one of our leads in that area at the time. And we've grown that business and in other business units within HP to combine solutions, both the Vertica big data, hardware, and really, as Justin was just talking about, and you brought up, the applications that are analyzing this big data. So partners in the ecosystem that help people analyze the data. Once the Vertica or what have you has done the analysis, you have to report on that and make it in a nice human-readable form, human consumable form. So we've built out our ecosystem at Dasher to have not only the analytics piece, but also the reporting piece.
And on the as-a-service side, do you work with Good Data at all, or are you familiar with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And Justin, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. You've worked with them more, I think, on their projects.
Yeah. So Good Data is a large consumer of Vertica, and they actually leverage it for their back-end analytics platform for the service that they offer. And Dasher's been working with Good Data, call it over the past year, to optimize the environment that they run on. Vertica has varying different deployment scenarios, and you can actually deploy it in a VM environment or on bare metal. And we did an analysis to see if there was an ROI on moving from a virtualized environment running on OpenStack to a bare metal environment. And through a 6-month proof of concept, we leveraged HP labs in Houston. We had a 4-node system set up with multiple terabytes of data, and we were able to determine we saw a 4-to-1 increase in performance from moving from a virtual machine with the same resources to a bare metal machine. And that's going to have a significant impact on the way they move data in their environment in the future and how they address customers with larger data sets.
Interesting. So when we think about optimizing the architecture and environment for big data, are there any other surprises or perhaps counterintuitive things that have come up? Maybe even converged infrastructure for smaller organizations that want to get in fast and don't want to be too concerned with the architecture underlying the analytics applications.
Yeah, I've seen that, there's a tendency now with so many free solutions out there to pick a free solution, something that gets the job done now, something that grows the business rapidly, but to forget about what business needs 3 years down the road if it's going to grow, if it's going to survive. There are a lot of startups out there who are able to build a big data infrastructure, scale it to 5,000 nodes, and then you reach a limit. There's network limits on how fast the switch can move data between nodes. Constantly pushing the limits of 10 gig, 40 gig, and soon 100 gig networks to keep those infrastructures up. And depending on what architecture you choose, you may be limited in the number of nodes you can go to. So there's solutions out there that can process 1 million transactions per second with 100 nodes, and then there's solutions that can process 1 million transactions per second with 20 nodes, but maybe cost slightly more. So if you think long term, if you start in the cloud, you want to be able to move out of the cloud. If you start with an open ecosystem, you want to make sure that your hardware refresh is not going to cost so much that the company can't afford it 3 years down the road. And that's one of the areas we help consult with when picking different architectures is think long term. Don't think 6 weeks down the road, how are we going to get our service up and running? Think, okay, we have a significant client install base. How are we going to grow the business from 3 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years?
Okay. Given that you've got quite a few different types of clients and the idea of optimizing architecture for the long term seems to be important. I know smaller companies that there's that temptation to just run with whatever you can get going quickly. What other lessons can we learn from that long-term view when it comes to skills, security, something more than perhaps the speeds and feeds aspects of thinking long-term about big data, Justin?
Yeah, so I would say, think about where your data is going to reside and the requirements and regulations that you may run into. There's a million different, a million different regulations we have to do now with HIPAA, ITAR, um, you know, money transaction processing companies. So if you ever foresee that need, make sure you're in an ecosystem that supports it. The temptation for smaller companies is just go cloud, but who owns that data if you go under, or who owns that data when you get audited? The other problem is, encryption, right? If you're going to start gaining larger customers, once you have a proven technology or a proven service, they're going to want to make sure that you're compliant for all their regulations, not just your regulations that your company is enforcing. So there's SIEM and logging that they're required to have. There's going to be encryption and protocols and the ability to do audits on anyone who's accessing the data.
Right. Okay. Again, on this topic of optimizing, when you do it right, when you think about the long term, how do you know you've got that down? Are there some metrics of success? Are there some metrics, KPIs, returns on investment that one should look to know that they're not erring on the side of going too commercial or too open source or thinking short term only? Maybe some examples of what one should be looking for and how to measure that, Justin.
Yeah. I think that's going to be largely subjective to each business. Obviously, if you're just going to put, rule of thumb, it shouldn't cost you more money than it makes you, right? I mean, if you implement a system and it costs you $10 million to run and your ROI is $5 million, you've made a bad decision. But I think the two factors are the value to the business. So if you're a large enterprise and you implement big data and it gives you the ability to make decisions and you can quantify those decisions, for example, a new marketing campaign or something you're doing with your remote sites or your retail branches, and it's quantifiable and it's having an impact on the business, then you can put a number to that and see how much value that big data system's creating. The other way to judge it is impact on business. So for ad serving companies who have, the way they make money is ad impressions, and the more ad impressions they can do for the less cost in their environment, the more money they're going to make, and the larger the delta is between the infrastructure cost and the top line that they get to report to all their investors. So if they can do, 56 billion ad impressions in a day, and you can double that by switching architectures, that's probably a good investment. But if you can only, improve it by 10% by switching architectures, it's probably too much work for what it's worth.
And then one last area on this optimization idea. We've seen, of course, organizations subjectively, as you say, make decisions about whether to do this on premises, maybe either virtualized or on bare metal. They'll do their cost-benefit analysis. Others are looking at the cloud and as a service model. Over time, we expect to have a hybrid capability. And as you mentioned, if you think ahead that you can, if you start in the cloud, move private, or if you start private, you want to be able to move the cloud, we're seeing the likelihood of more of that, what I call fungibility, being able to move back and forth. So thinking about that, do you expect that companies will be able to do that? Where does that make the most sense when it comes to data? Is there a type of analysis that you might want to do in a cloud environment primarily, but other types of things you might do private? How do we start to think about breaking out where on the spectrum of a hybrid cloud set of options one should be considering for different types of big data activity?
Yeah, it's in the large data analytics world, I think it's almost an either-or decision at this point in time. I don't know what it'll look like in the future, but workloads that lend themselves extremely well to the cloud are inconsistent. Maybe seasonal, where you're a business and 90% of your business happens in December. Seasonal workloads like that lend themselves extremely well to the cloud. Or if you're a business just starting out and you don't know if you're going to need, a full 100-node cluster to run whatever platform or analytics platform you choose. And the hardware sits idle for 50% of the time, or you don't get full utilization. Those companies from a cloud architecture, because they can scale up and scale down based on needs. Companies that benefit from on-premise are ones that can see significant savings by not using cloud and paying someone else to run their environment. Those companies typically pin the CPU usage meter at 100% as much as they can, and then add nodes to add more capacity. And the best advice I could say is if you start in the cloud or you start on bare metal, make sure you have agility and you're able to move workloads around. If you choose one sort of architecture that only works in the cloud and you're scaling up, and you have to do a rip and replace scenario just to get out of the cloud and move to on-premise, that's going to be significant business impact. One of the reasons I like Vertica is they have a cloud instance that can run on a public cloud. That same instance, that same architecture runs just as well on bare metal, only faster.
All right, great. Chris, last word to you. For those organizations out there struggling with big data, trying to figure out the best path, trying to think long-term and from an architectural and strategic point of view, what should they consider when coming to an organization like Dasher? Where is your sweet spot in terms of working with these organizations? How should they best consider how to take advantage of what you have to offer?
Sure. I think that every organization is different. This is one area where that's true. When people are just looking for servers, they're pretty much all the same. But when you're actually trying to figure out your strategy for how you're going to use big data analytics, every company, big or small, probably does have a slightly different thing they're trying to solve. So that's where we would sit down with that client and really listen, right? And understand, are they trying to solve a speed issue with their data? Are they trying to solve massive amounts of data and trying to find the needle in the haystack, the golden egg, golden nugget in there? And each of those approaches certainly has a different answer to it. So coming with your business problem and also what you would like to see as a result, we would like to see X number of increase in our customer satisfaction number, or X number of increase in revenue, or something like that, helps us define the metric that we can then help design toward.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been discussing how optimizing for a big data environment really requires a look across many different variables. And we've seen how organizations are able to spread the benefits of big data more generally now, not only in the type of organization that can take advantage of it, but the people within those organizations. And we've heard how Dasher Technologies is using technologies like HP and HP Vertica to help organizations bring the big data capabilities to more opportunities for business benefits, and of course across more types of companies and vertical industries. So a big thank you to our guests. We've been joined by Justin Harrigan, Data Architecture Strategist at Dasher Technologies. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Dana.
And also thank you to Chris Sasso, Senior Vice President of Technology at Dasher Technologies. Appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you very much, Dana.
And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us as well for this Big Data Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of HP-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening, and come back next time.